Great, thanks, Dan. Good to see everyone. Great stories as well, really good. Neelam, if you do get the building back, make sure it's a good price. Just work on that really hard. And it's a historic night tonight. I don't know if you saw the letter from the Queen to Gareth Southgate. Quite amazing, but again, just praising their character, wasn't it? Which has been exemplary, really, across the tournament over the last couple of years, and standing up for kids who are going hungry and equality and so on. So it's a proud moment for the nation, isn't it? Just to have those role models there, a couple of which are Christians being brought up by their mums and families as Christians. So it's exciting. I was just going to look at this idea that Jim started talking about what it means to have a kingdom mentality rather than empire mentality, because for the Israelites and for the Christians around Jesus at the time, they were all living under empire, weren't they? So the Israelites were living under the Egyptian empire, and the new Christians were living under the Roman Empire. So they had to try and work out how they were going to grow and live and think inside a very oppressive empire mentality. And so I just wanted to bring out that a few slides you might have seen before if you've got a good memory, but I'm going to rattle through those and try and bring it to life a bit as to how we're doing it. But I thought what Jim brought, to us around empire versus kingdom was great, and how we can have an empire mentality within the church, or you could be working for a big corporate international organization that is empire and thinking perhaps, but you can still have a kingdom subversive mentality. So I have prepared, despite all the excitement of the week, some slides. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, back one. Oh, forward one. So living in the presence, kingdom, not empire, is how I was going to sort of piece that together. And remember this old saying from Jesus: the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in the field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. And what I want to get out from today really is we can do the smallest of things, the tiniest things, a bit like Naomi and Leanne did on the train this week with the person they met. Do the tiniest act, and yet it's these tiny things, just like the mustard seed, that have a massive impact and that grow over time in people's lives and through generations. So the mustard seed, we know, was a subversive plant. It sort of planted, it was banned in Israel, was the thing, because it just took over everything and it dominated. And this is a plant that I found down at the Clear office this week, photographed it. It's where we do the work with refugees. And this plant isn't a mustard plant. It's Japanese knotweed. I don't know if you've seen that plant before, but it's the most subversive plant that's around, and it does the same thing as the mustard seed. Same reason it was banned in Israel is why this plant is so difficult here in Southampton and the UK. And so when you spot this plant, sadly, you can't just break it off and that's the end of it. It's now a 5-year plan to try and stop this plant from wrecking your building, because it just grows and its roots spread, and it destroys walls and buildings. So luckily this was well away from the building itself, and we'll just have to get a company out to come and sort it out. But effectively what the parable of the mustard seed was saying is the kingdom is a subversive plant. It doesn't have to be big and showy. It's there, innocuous, this small little plant, but actually it's very powerful. And it spreads rapidly. And this is how Paul described the value of the kingdom. How Jesus described it was Mark 10:45. He said that I haven't come to be served, but I've come to serve and give my life as a ransom for many. So Jesus articulated the kingdom as serving, and Paul identified it as these 9 fruits of the Holy Spirit he talks about to the people of Galatia. But the important thing about this is that he used 9 characteristics because the Greeks had 9 characteristics they used themselves. And so none of them involved love. None of them involved peace. And so what Paul did was create 9 subversive values to live by. And these were to inform the thinking and the living that goes against the empire. Paul also wrote this in 1 Corinthians. Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. So the wisdom of the Greeks started with Socrates, who tutored Plato, who tutored Aristotle. Sorry if you've heard this before, but those three Greek minds are what has created the empire thinking that we've had ever since. And their 9 virtues, not the 9 fruits of the Holy Spirit, but the 9 virtues of the Greeks were these: courage, justice, temperance, generosity, wit, friendliness, truthfulness, magnificence, and greatness of soul. Nothing wrong with some of those, but the idea of being great and magnificent meant that someone had to embody that. Someone had to be the magnificent person and the great person to embody all of these values. Just as for the 9 fruits of the Spirit, the person that embodies those 9 values of love, joy, peace, kindness, etc., is Jesus, and he identifies himself with all of those values. But the person that Plato and Aristotle and Socrates created from their 9 values was Alexander the Great. And I won't go through all this, but he conquered Europe, Asia, Africa, all on horseback, all in a matter of years, and was called the master of the universe, the King of Kings, the Emperor. He was the magnificent one. He was the courageous one. And what happened was, as he became great and magnificent, and what he would do is the same thing that every other empire has done since then. He would arrive at a place, and some of these places would have been who Paul was writing to in the book of in the letter of Galatians. He would arrive at a place, Alexander the Great, and say, "You can join me today, or you can die today. Please choose now." And most people wisely decided to join his army rather than be destroyed by the army that he had brought to them. And so his army grew and grew and grew with every country that he took over and every animal that he took captive to be part of this thing. But what happened was, because he was the master of the universe and the King of Kings, and everyone served him, everyone around him also wanted to be him. So when he died, and potentially it's no one quite knows, but he may have been poisoned by one of his generals or one of his senior leaders. When he did die young at the age of 32, all the other generals, whether you're the general in charge of Europe or Africa or Asia or wherever, you're going to be thinking, "Oh, I'd love to be Alexander the Great, the master of the universe, the King of Kings and the Emperor." And so all I need to do is fight the other generals, and then I'll be the King of Kings. And so that's what they did. They fought each other. Every army fought all the other armies until they wiped each other out, and the kingdom collapsed. And Alexander the Great, who built this enormous empire, destroyed. And so the words of Paul are true, aren't they? That the wisdom of the Greeks is in fact foolishness. And nothing about Alexander the Great was about love. Nothing was about joy, nothing about peace. And so when Paul writes those words, it's these values that we hold on to. And in John 1 John 4, it says, "God is love. Those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them." And so I think what I wanted to come off the back of Jim's talk was, when we talk about not having an empire mentality and having a kingdom mentality, it's about being the most loving people on the planet, about people who love, serve, and care for others around us. I think I've already made those points. That God made the foolish, the wisdom of this world. The Greeks looked for wisdom, but we have not received the spirit of the world, but the spirit who's from God, that we may understand what God has freely given us. And he's lavished on us his love. This is a quote from Tom Wright, and I just want to think about the difference between love and power, because empire is all about power and kingdom is all about love. And Tom Wright says, "A new sort of power will be let loose upon the world, and it will be the power of self-giving love. This is the heart of the revolution that was launched on Good Friday. You cannot defeat the usual sort of power by the usual sort of means. If one force overcomes another, it is still force that wins. Rather, at the heart of the victory of God over all the powers of the world, there lies self-giving love, which in obedience to the ancient prophetic vocation will give its life as a ransom for many." And so kingdom versus empire is really about saying the power of love overcomes the love of power. And the power of love is a curious thing, I heard it said. And so Another quote, Henry Newen, is we live in a culture where identity is based on how well we do, how much we do, how much we possess, and what others say about us. And everything about the kingdom is the opposite of that, that the ultimate embodiment of the kingdom is Jesus, who said, I've not come to be served, but to serve. And he's the one who kneels down and washes his disciples' feet. And that is our example. So I just had a few that bounced on unexpectedly there to the minions. Subversive living. I'll tell you one thing that I did recently, and I only reflected on it afterwards, it wasn't a deliberate thing. But quite often I'm on the gate on a Friday at one of the schools, and it was pouring with rain, but it was unexpected rain. So every teenager came without an umbrella. And so not all, but most of the staff were safely inside the building. And myself and one other member of staff, we decided to go outside and we took our big brollies out. And every child that came into the school who didn't have a uniform in, we walked them in underneath our umbrella, trying to keep 2 meters away in the pandemic, and walked them into school and kept them dry. And for every person we did that to, they beamed with a massive smile because someone had cared for them, someone had kept them dry for their 50-yard dash to the school. And it's the simplest thing, isn't it? It's a small act of kindness, but actually brought a lot of joy to probably a few hundred kids who are coming into school who were otherwise going to be soaking wet. And the other example I just got, I know we've talked about this a lot, but our winter bed program that we did, particularly this year when it was so difficult to organize and piece together with COVID and signing off with public health. And we had great help from them and from the city council to do that. But to bring in 8 people a night from the streets who would otherwise be in the freezing, bitter cold, January, February, when it was really bad, and just improving their chances of surviving this winter and making that happen. You know, it took a mammoth effort to do that by a lot of people giving up their time to stay awake during the night, to prep it all, get food together, all just for 8 people. So it's not a massive thing, is it? It's not for hundreds and thousands of people who've done it. It's a mustard seed act of kindness that we've done, but it's subversive because for many towns and cities, they would have just said, well, they can stay on the streets, or we can't do anything this year because of COVID. But we, through love, patience, kindness, we managed to create this space where 8 people could come off the streets. And that is kingdom thinking. It's not about empire, but it's about serving people. I think we see some of that kingdom mentality in people like Marcus Rashford, who put his own reputation on the line by standing up for holiday hunger and the campaign that he led. He knew he was going to get support, but he also knew he'd get backlash from it. He's the captain of Man United, but he turned it around, didn't he? You know, he's managed to get food for kids during the holidays, and he knew what it was like himself to grow up as a kid who went hungry during the holidays. And so a massive example, and he does work, you know, within that sort of very, very wealthy environment, but within it, he's got a kingdom mentality that he shows. A couple more quick examples. There's a refugee camp. I think this one was out in the Jordan. Thousands of people living in these camps. Some from Syria, where 400,000 people have been killed over recent years in that country, and half of people have left that country to try and find safety from the bombs that keep being dropped there. And you look at that, there's nothing that we as a church can do for thousands of people like that, but we can make a difference to one family. And so, you know, we've applied to the Home Office, take one family that's living in one of these tents now to come and live in Southampton instead. And so Dan's done brilliantly to get a house together for that. Laura Wells has worked really hard to get a team together. Then we had a call with the Home Office. If you want to know a funny story, talk to Dan Pooley about that. I won't tell it myself, but we managed to get through our Home Office interview, and then we'll look to move a family from the tent on the left to this house on the right in Southampton, which will welcome them into that house. And the thing about it is, any local authority, any country in the world could say, we'll take a family from here and we'll look after them. But instead, and some countries, you know, have pledged to take some, but the reality is they're still out there. But little old us, we can't do much, but we can just do one plant of difference, one mustard seed, and make the difference. Sorry, my flick through. We can make a difference to one family and bring them to here. And it's just a plant, but it's subversive because it will also spread rapidly and give encouragement to other groups around this area to also follow our example. We've already done that one. These are just some stats which are incredible from Love Southampton in the past year. So from March 20 to 21, created a brand new team to work really hard during COVID to help. And these are the stats: £2.9 million worth of food distributed just in Southampton, 13,000 odd volunteer hours, 280 winter beds were provided, and then 1,360 debt clients helped by the church. So I've just picked out a couple of stats from an annual report we're going to release in the next few days or next few weeks. And but that's incredible, isn't it? Because like when you meet the team, it's literally just 3 or 4 people that are working on this all the time, but then loads of volunteers that are supporting to make it happen. And it's subversive, isn't it? Because it's about serving other people, not about us being great, but about us being great at serving. One more example is just like this amazing grant that we've received from the National Lottery for the work of Clear, which will change the lives of 1,500 people in the city. A huge amount of money coming to us that we'll steward and spend well to make sure it goes to people that are right on the margins of society, again, could be just easily lost and their voice not heard. But we work really hard to do that. And it's because of that kingdom living and kingdom thinking that we have planted into us by Jesus, who himself was a refugee when he fled, him and his family, from King Herod to Egypt. So I'm nearly finished. Just to bring this home, you know, these things can look really simple: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. But they're everything that the kingdom is, and they're everything that the kingdom is not, that the empire is not. And so when we find ourselves being gentle or good or kind, the phrase at the end of that is there's no law against these things. So no one's ever going to tell you off for being too loving or too joyful or too peaceful. That's what it says at the end of that verse. And so we can be proud when we're just showing the most loving response to someone, the kindest response, whether it's on a train or whether it's just in our conversations. It makes a massive impact. We don't need to be doing huge things for us to be like this little plant. We can be making a huge difference just by being joyful, loving, kind, and patient. I've got one little quote to finish with from Mother Teresa, which my friend Steve Chalk tweeted today, and I liked it. It said, "Never worry about numbers, help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest to you." Never worry about numbers, help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest to you. And for me, I think that sums up what we're trying to do. You know, we haven't got huge gatherings or trying to fill any stadiums at the moment, have we, or any halls with large numbers of people, but everywhere we go, we can just be showing those acts of kindness, friendship, and love, gentleness, goodness to people. And loads of things we're involved with in the church are just full of that kingdom mentality. And it's only because of your generosity and your support that that is happening. And, you know, I know many of you supported some of the projects that we've put on there today, but even if you haven't, it's not about that. It's about the conversation with the person on the train or the neighbor that we help with a few things. Do you know what I mean? It's the little things that bring this kingdom alive, and it keeps on growing and has done for centuries. So we're glad to be part of the kingdom, not part of the empire. That's me, Nikki. Thank you.